watching Property TV.
Hello and welcome to Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin and this is the programme where you can have all of your property related questions answered by our team of experts. And with me today is John Howard, property developer, author and mentor. Welcome, John.
Great to be back.
Good.
Thank you for inviting me.
Good trip in from Ipswich.
Very good trip. Less than an hour on the train, as you know.
Is it really?
It is.
And how long would it take me to drive there?
Oh, probably an hour and a quarter.
Hour and a quarter. Okay, lovely. Well, we'll have to do that.
Well, we're meant to be having lunch, so.
We are indeed. Okay, and joining John is Byron Crellin, CEO of Debt Squared Group, Commercial Enforcement Specialist. Welcome to you, Byron.
Hi, Stephen.
Good to have you back. And have you had a good trip in?
2 hours 5 direct from Chester.
Right.
That's a lovely city, Chester.
That's really quick. So how quick will it be when we get HS2?
An hour and 30.
Amazing. That is incredible. What a great government we've got.
Well, that's if they build it.
I've seen the plans.
We've seen the plans. It's a start.
I think we've all seen the plans, and we've all seen the original budget as well, which I think has gone from, what is it, 25 billion to 125 billion. Is that good fiscal management by the government?
No government's very good at managing large infrastructure programs, are they really?
We seem to have had that with the track and trace as well, don't we? 37 billion pounds seem to have.
We all make mistakes.
I suppose we do. Well, that's very big of you to admit it on behalf of your party, but there we are. Okay, better get on with the questions. And John, you're going first. So do the panel think that the proposition to change UK household heating systems to either hydrogen or complex heat exchangers is either practical, affordable or realistic?
Great question. And I've got some developments that we've been forced to put heat exchangers in,
right,
by the local authority. And now most local authorities are saying, look, you know, if you're putting in new heating, you've got to put heating in on the building regs now. It needs to be, you know, a heat source pump or something like that. And they're very expensive. We paid 7,000 a piece for these heat source pumps. We've got 21 all outside these properties. And they look just dreadful, to be quite honest.
Hold on, so that's £7,000 for the actual heat exchanger. Yeah. What about the internal stuff?
Well, the internal stuff is part of that, so the whole thing is 7,000. But the actual unit's about 5,000-6,000. It's very expensive.
And how would that compare with a conventional gas boiler
of probably £1,500?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a huge difference. And of course, in a house like mine, which is Grade 2 listed, they're useless because it's all that insulation. So the insulation levels have to be super high, which is great for the environment and going forward. But of course, a lot of houses are nowhere near that, and that's the problem. So very expensive. The government are going to give grants, aren't they? They're going to have to, because otherwise, there's no way these are ever going to be done in time. You're talking about 2030 and all the rest of it is. It's a big challenge, and it's expensive for the developer.
But I mean, I was looking the other day at the government announcement. They say they'd produced a grant to do about 1 million homes, but there's another 20 million to do, isn't there? So where's the money coming from all this to do it retrospectively?
Well, in the old days, of course, it would be a European grant, wouldn't it? But now we've made the right decision, right, and not involved with that. Those clowns.
You're quite
anymore.
Sure about that, are you?
Yeah. Now we're not involved with those clowns anymore. You know, we have to find this money ourselves, and there will be there is a levelling up across the UK of what the government are trying to do up north and down south. You know, all this will take time to settle down, but you know, Rishi Sunak is finding the money for things. But it does mean, I think, our taxes are going up. I know we're off on another subject tangent slightly, but it is important because, you know, none of these green initiatives are going to happen unless they tax people more. You know, it's not possible.
I do think, John, I think either government or the authorities are all over the place on this green thinking. I mean, I can remember probably 7 or 8 years ago now, development down here, they insisted that 2 biomass boilers were put in as reserve boilers. They then found out that storing the wood chip was highly dangerous because it combusts.
Yeah.
And so I don't think those biomass boilers, which were, I think, from memory, $1.5 million a piece, ever got used. And now, of course, the directive is no more biomass boilers.
No.
I do worry that some of these green issues are not really thought through properly. No. And I think, it's all right, the government saying, well, everybody can convert and go into heat exchangers or hydrogen or whatever.
It's not realistic.
It's not realistic.
And it's very expensive for the developers. And at a time when lots of materials are going up as well, building materials going up, it's not very helpful.
We on the commercial side, there's the government remit that by 2023, I think it is, every single commercial property has to have an EPC rating of E. Now, a lot of our larger agents are onto that and obviously are working to make sure that portfolios, but for smaller, and we've talked about it on many shows where you've got smaller developers, who are buying 2 or 3 properties, commercial properties as pension, investments, etc. I don't know if they're aware of what's coming in terms of you're not going to be able to let a commercial property out unless it meets the EP standards. I know there are some criteria you can get around that, but I mean that's something else that I think is under the radar for a lot of people.
And the other thing talking about that is that some of these electric systems, because they're talking about the government that want to put electric in rather than gas, with a electric wet system, radiator system, the EPC is lower than it would be if it was gas.
Right.
And people and the government need to change these rules on EPCs because otherwise it's making even more of a problem for people.
Well, some years ago we went through the trend of underfloor heating being very popular, didn't we? And that was electric and obviously very expensive to run.
And at one point they tried ceiling heating. That was the other one. Yeah. In your heyday in the 70s, that's what it was, wasn't it?
60s.
That wasn't around in the 60s.
Okay. So is this having much of an effect on the commercial market, do you think, Byron?
Well, I think EPC is, for the bigger agents, it's there. They're aware of it and dealing with it from the conversations that we've had. We're just about to launch an initiative to support smaller regional landlords and developers in terms of getting them into a place where they are prepared so the continuation of reletting the properties, they're not going to fall foul of the government regulation that is, as I say, I generally believe it's under the radar for a lot of agents.
I think I'm sure you're absolutely right, and I've got a number of small commercial units. And interestingly, if it's a forward paying insuring lease, in other words, the tenant's meant to be paying for everything. Should the tenant be paying for the EPC, or should Muggins here be paying as usual?
Through the service charge account, I think, John.
Well, that'll be all right then.
It's not my favourite subject. So
no, we know that.
Right. Okay. All right. Okay, John. Thank you very much indeed. Byron. I'm a commercial landlord and I've been told that the Ministry of Justice has said it intends to introduce new rules around VAT when I instruct an enforcement agent, presumably on debt. Can the panel explain what these changes are? I didn't realise the Ministry of Justice had any authority to do anything about VAT.
This has been going on longer than EastEnders.
Right.
So 2014 legislation changed, and pre-2014 legislation changing, the revenue issued the new scale of charges in terms of what the legislation would then support for enforcement agents to apply, and the revenue with the VAT was showing that the VAT is applied to every charge. That's fine, no problem at all. But there was wording in there that would suggest that it's not the tenant who's responsible for the VAT, because the tenant hasn't requested the service. It's the landlord.
That's a good point.
So I went to the VAT clearance team and said, can you clarify this? Because I've got some agents that are going, so we're now responsible for the VAT for our landlords because we're instigating you, Byron, to do this, to recover a debt, a commercial debt, commercial rent. Other agents were going, until we see it as policy, nothing changes. The VAT, your VAT on your charges, you recover it from the tenant. So as little as in the last 2 weeks, the Ministry of Justice have published a paper that says new legislation is going to be introduced. That is that VAT on enforcement charges for the recovery of an enforcement debt so commercial rent, etc., or the enforcement of high court warrants, will be the responsibility of the claimant, i.e. the landlord. So landlord wants his rent, in my world. He instructs me, or his agent instructs me.
In my world too.
Indeed. We will then apply a net fee to the tenant in line with the statutory scale, and we would then invoice you, John, for a VAT disbursement fee. It's an in and out exercise for you in terms of.
Well, it is. It's only in and out.
But it's an administration nightmare.
Yeah, but also it's only in and out if we've opted to charge VAT to the tenant on the rent.
Yeah.
Because some investments don't have VAT on the rent, and some do. So that's a bit of a tricky one.
Well,
Luckily, I've got you to explain it.
Well, isn't it purely just the fact whether there is any added value by that final stage?
Well, it's just a backtrack, an interesting point that you make. If the landlord's not VAT registered, then we apply the gross fee to the tenant, but the tenant is not entitled to VAT relief.
No.
Goodness me. I'll tell you what.
But again, it's the same on service charge, isn't it? If you're providing services that are a lease requirement, I think I've got this the right way around, it's a lease requirement, then it's non-vatable.
Yes.
If it's not specified in the lease that those services or personnel or whatever are they're just provided as a matter of goodwill or an additional service, then it is vatable. I think that's the right way.
So we have, in most commercial leases, and again, John is probably closer to leases than myself, but most commercial leases capture the ability, and the terminology that we look for is the ability to apply cost, charges or interest on a default.
Yes.
So if they do that, then we can apply our fee, inclusive of VAT, to the defaulter, the tenant, in the recovery of an outstanding service charge, insurance, etc. But it's interesting just in terms of on the VAT point, because it then leads to another question of at what point is the VAT due and payable by John to Debt Squared, as an example.
If you don't recover the debt.
If we don't
recover the debt, but you recover every time, so there's never a problem.
Well, you're very kind. That is true, actually. That is true. Yeah. How can I have missed that point?
I have a feeling if we spend too much more time on VAT, our viewers will glaze over.
I am already.
No, it's a very complex situation,
it's a good question,
isn't
actually.
it?
It's a very good question.
I think the conclusion is we're expecting something out from the government, from the MOJ, within the matter of the next couple of days, week or so. At that point, I'm sure we can get it out to the viewers.
Well, let's hope the MOJ concur with HMRC.
That's always a challenge.
That is a challenge.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all we've got time for in this half of the show. So join me again after the break, and we'll be asking more questions and getting more answers.
You are watching Property TV. You are watching Property TV.
Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Property Question Time. I'm sitting with John Howard and Byron Crellin. And John, we'll have your second question now.
Very good.
I've learned from a conversation I overheard that my neighbours are going to extend their home under what they refer to as permitted development rights. I understand this to mean that they don't have to get planning permission for what they want to do. Is there any way I can get to see what they're proposing to do without asking them directly? I just don't want to cause any neighbourly conflict, but I am worried about any potential effect on my property.
My favourite subject, PD, not. Anyway, here we go. So, anybody can put, not anybody, if it's a listed building you can't, but anyone can put an extension, a ground floor extension up to 3 metres without needing planning permission anyway, but you must have building regulation approval. So if there's a small extension, rear extension, then you don't need even planning permission anymore. If you want to go for a slightly bigger one and you need permissive development, then although it's 56 days to get it, you have to put the plans into the council, and they are accessible to everybody, so it's public. So you can see those plans on the planning hub.
But if it's only small, it's not
only small. They don't even need to do that anymore. No. So the best thing is to pop round, have a cup of tea with your neighbour, and say, look, we don't want to object. We want you to have whatever you want, but may we have a look at the plans? I mean, that would be the most sensible way forward. And of course, if the neighbours are neighbourly, then probably they're going to come and offer that and be respectful anyway. But if you're unsure about any PD, the cheapest way around it, rather than get a planning consultant in, is to talk to the local authority. You know, you're paying for their services through your rates anyway. They're public servants. They're not there to try and catch you out or anything like that. They're there to give proper advice. It may be hard to get hold of them. I'm not suggesting
there's usually a duty planning
but there's
officer.
normally a duty plan, and they understand these PD rights. And just ask them, do I need, you know, if you're looking to do PD, you know, is it small enough to do without any permission, just building regulation approval, or do I need to put a PD application or a full application, a planning application in? And they will advise you accordingly.
I read in some of the trade press that a number of councils, local authorities, are, what shall we say, resisting the government directive on these PD rights.
That's interesting you should say that. So absolutely right. They're using Article 4. They're using Article 4 to stop PD. Now that's not in the spirit of.
You better tell us what Article 4 means.
I knew you were going to say that. So Article 4 is an article that's put on by the local authority in certain areas of a town to stop them having perhaps any more say, HMOs or anything like that. In this case, permissive development. So you've got to go for full planning. It doesn't mean you won't get it, but it gives them more control, and that's what they're looking for. And that is against really the principle of permissive development. But Article 4 has been around for many, many years, as has permissive development. People think it started in 2014 or 13 with offices to residential, but permissive development's been around for donkey's years and covers a number of areas. And if you want to know any more about that, the government website is very, very good. It will explain these things to everyone. Yeah.
I mean, I suppose ultimately the council's got to have some kind of control, even if it's sort of fairly light-handed, haven't they?
They have, but they're using it in the wrong way. They're abusing the system. And I think Michael Gove, who is, of course, the new housing secretary, he's got a massive job on his hands. Very, very bright.
So is he the 13th one?
No,
in
he's
10
not.
Years,
No, he's a secretary of state.
Oh, right.
You're not talking about the housing minister. That's different.
Right.
But we've had 12 or 13 of them in 10 years, 11 years. But Michael Gove is in charge, above all that, in charge of everything. And he's got a very, very challenging job, but he's a super bright guy. And I think he's going to make some big changes,
Well, good to see. Well, I don't suppose this is something that affects your business very much, really, is it? Or...
You're further down the line, aren't you, when it all goes wrong.
When it all yeah. It's all gone wrong. Come in, Byron.
We do resolve issues.
You resolve the issues to start,
not
but at the end,
yeah.
I'm trying to resolve issues to start with. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, John, thank you very much for that. Byron, your second question. Given that during the first quarter of the year, more than 100,000 commercial businesses fell subject to COVID-caused distress, do the panel think this will have a lasting effect on the commercial property market?
I think 100,000 is polite.
Sounds very low to me.
Yeah. I think we've recently done a show, the three of us.
Yeah.
And I think I said that there was over 350,000 businesses in Q4 of last year that were in financial distress, and that carried through and washed through into Q1, and that's COVID related. I think I've said on previous shows, this is never going to be a quick fix. No. I think the big issue for commercial landlords that they need to be aware of is your tenant the tenant that you think it is? Because there's been an awful lot of new businesses being created, end of furlough, etc. A lot of people are talking, you know, you can hear it when you're in the supermarkets, you go to the pub, you go to a restaurant, people are talking about, oh, I know somebody that, you know, got this from their local authority and therefore they've done this business, they've bought a new car and they're starting again. Yeah. And it's like, and I think
they've had the grant.
Yeah, well, and I think commercial landlords are going to realise who actually is in occupation once the shackles come off, the restrictions are removed in March 2022. There's no quick glossary for this. The landscape of the commercial market sector in whatever, whether it be industrial, retail, etc., it's not going to change by Q3. It's going to wash its through. There's going to be landlords saddled with debt that is going to be unrecoverable. But a lot of commercial landlords have made payment plans during the course of COVID because they've been forced to engage.
I think we've all tried to help. My policy is if they're bigger than me, the tenant's bigger than me, business-wise, then they pay.
They can pay, you've said,
and if not, they don't. They definitely don't. They've been trying to help. But I think the other thing to remember is empty rates, because as a landlord, if the shop comes empty, premises comes empty, you've got empty rates to pay, and I think that's appalling.
Well, it's quite interesting this morning, John. I noticed in one of the leading property press publications that there's a number of banks now refusing to lend on retail property in portfolios if that portfolio is too weighted towards retail. And I just don't know what sort of issue this is going to cause.
Well, you can understand that, because I mean, certainly with some of the funding that we get, if it's commercial, they'll only lend for the length of the lease on an overdraft quite often. So if it's a 5-year lease, you know, in the old days, 21-year leases, 25-year leases, 15-year leases. Now, 3, 5, 7-year leases. And I think so. It's different.
We've got scenarios as well where we've got what were prime portfolilos, where it was a queue for tenants to get in, and there's a beauty parade effectively.
It was.
What's your turnover? You know, you're not suitable for this. Now it's very much a case of doing deals, monthly rents, quarter one free.
Monthly rents is one thing, and just, you're absolutely right. I had the opportunity to buy a shop next to Marks and Spencer's and opposite Next. Now, 10 years ago, if you said to me I had the opportunity to buy a shop like that in an area, in a position like that, I'd say you're crazy.
I'm surprised you haven't already.
Well, there we go. Because the yields are so low, it will go to a pension fund or someone like that. Now, you know, we have the opportunity, you know, small developers have the opportunity to invest in that type of building, which is quite exciting in one way. But it just shows you where it is as well.
And of course, I've answered that
in terms of the market.
Thinking about a sort of what a retail street looks like in terms of an industrial part, but you've also got offices, and then one of the biggest challenges is actually getting people back to the office. Because remote working seems to be, you know, the future for a lot of organisations. Hot desking, reducing the size of their office is the big. I think a lot of people are going to keep the offices, but they're just going to reduce the size of what they want. So reducing the rent and everything else. And I think, you know, it's all changing, and it will take time to sort out and settle down. This week I've done 4 or 5 Zoom calls, and I got on my train to come down today. And 5, 6 people in the carriage with me.
Well, you are first class, so that might be something to do with it. But
moving on, but I think people are realising that actually, from a cost saving point of view, more efficient. I can do 4 calls on Teams. Than getting on a train and
absolutely.
I do worry about this funding though. We've seen in the past, John, haven't we, on the residential market, that any starvation of funding, whether by way of high deposits or just really strict criteria in terms of earning multiples, it can just damage a market so much. You know, so free and easy funding is the answer to most things.
I think. And he's probably one of the, in this category, the brave will be successful. Because they'll be able to trade it through.
I think you're right.
Thank you for that. I'm not sure it's a compliment or not.
Okay. Well, on that happy note, we're going to have to end the show. That's all we've got time for. So, John Howard, thank you very much for coming.
It's a pleasure as always.
Byron Crellin, thank you for your input today. Very useful and informative. Thank you. So, I'm Stephen Galpin. Join me again next time on Property Question Time.